it's really my great honor to present to you this program, AA on ASSID, ASSID, which was of course a funny play with the 4 subject matters we're going to discuss with AA: art, society, sexuality and identity, where I should add maybe to this 4 subjects that in a very fantastic way, all 4 are mingled and intertwined in the work of AA Bronson, not only as the artist AA Bronson, but also as a member of this famous collective. I always have been an extremely huge fan of General Idea. My name is Bart Rutten. I'm the artistic director of the Centraal Museum here in Utrecht, and have been working before at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, where I had the ability to work with the works of General Idea, but also before that at Montevideo Time-Based Arts. And especially Time-Based Arts is important in that regard, since General Idea was closely connected to this art organization of the 70s, 80s, where all their work was kind of distributed and also preserved. And I remember the moment that, as part of my job to go through the collection, I just stumbled with any other introduction to the tapes of General Idea, and we're going to see a few clips of that today, that kind of really blow my mind out. I thought it was so extremely witty and funny, but also so critical, that my love for the work they produced was kind of, well, it started over there and has never been disappeared. So I'm extremely proud that we could acquire, in the end, a huge work together with the Stedelijk Museum. It was one of my first acquisitions for the Centraal Museum. It's co-owned with the AIDS wallpaper, where we're going to talk about a little bit later as well. Why is AA such a great artist to have in this festival? Not only due to, he started in 1969, I was by then -3, with already disrupting and rethinking structures of media power. You have to go back to the 80s and 90s, the pre-internet dates, where it was quite hard to find platforms where you could tell different versions of reality, different value systems. And General Idea was extremely successful in bringing subject matters at the table through art into the rest of the world, related to queer perspectives, but also very much to the pandemic AIDS, which was very heavily making victims in the 80s. So General Idea, unfortunately, which was based on 3 members, Felix Parts and Georges Zontal. Unfortunately, I never had the chance to meet them because they passed away in 1994 due to the consequences of the AIDS virus. And I never had the pleasure to see them and meet them. So I'm extremely happy that we have AA here, which is extremely interesting, because then I go back to my own biography. After the 1990s, I kind of lost track on the work of General Idea. In my kind of idea, they did not exist anymore. And suddenly, in 2011, I ran into a gallery, Esther Schipper, because I said, hey, there's a show of AA Bronson. Hey, is that not the member of General Idea? And I went to that show and I was completely knocked out by the reappearance of AA Bronson as a very in-between position of a shaman, artist, curator with very heavily beautiful, visually interesting works. We're going to stumble into that as well a little bit later as well. And this duo-ness of this mostly clean media attacking collective General Idea towards this shamanistic figure that seemed to transfer completely to the 21st century, out of the 20th century, makes it for me a great honor to introduce General Idea, to introduce AA here on the screen, out of Berlin, live. AA, welcome.
Good morning.
Guten Morgen, because you're in Berlin right now, right?
I am in Berlin.
Did you get my introduction?
I did get your introduction.
Okay, good.
Very flattering.
Yes, yeah. So my love letter is here already, since the whole theme is modern love, and we are in this kind of far away situation, making use of technology. You never had a chance to use when you were part of the General Idea collective, and before. Yeah, sorry.
But there was something called slow scan television in the late 70s, which was like an extremely primitive version of this.
Yes.
And we did something on that.
And how is that for you right now? If you look back at kind of the fight General ID did for more platforms, different platforms for different value systems, for different ways of looking, can you say that kind of you succeeded in what you wanted by then in the contemporary situation where you have so much access to broadcasting, for example, or to platforms for broader attendance?
I suppose, yes. I mean, in a way, the world has become what we perhaps imagined in the early 70s. Yeah.
Yes, that's nice. So that brings us to the first chapter. We're going to talk about the A of art. And what is nice, we present every chapter with a small clip of the General Idea oeuvre. And we're going to start with a small clip out of Pilot. And we're going to step into that a little bit later, and hope you have the same experience if you never had seen any works by General Idea so far as I had back in the second half of the 90s of the last century. So maybe we can first watch 1.5 minutes of Pilot, and then we go back to AA to talk about art.
Brings us back to the same old question, which we've been asked so many times.
What do you mean by effective art, you mean? We covered that in our press conference in Vancouver last month. Let's look at that now.
Okay.
To some people, it means art that wins awards or grants or gets written about in art magazines. To others, is art that makes people think. And still, to others, is sort of a work is effective if it gets talked about in cocktail parties or gets joked about in talk shows, television talk shows. But I think for us, an effective work of art is the presentation of a cogent, persuasive idea, stripped of all irrelevant or distracting material, that not only sells the sensibility of the artist or the vision of the artist, but it sells the art object itself as well.
Yes. Are you saying that an artist should endear himself to the public?
Well, no. A good artist doesn't have to be loved. I mean, there are so many lovable, ineffectual artists, and nor does art criticism have much bearing on the artist's operational effectiveness. There are many examples of art and artists disliked by the very people they affect. But by the same token, much art that is loved by critics and the public falls sadly short of its goals. This is not to suggest that art should be grating or irritating or hated to be effective.
Back to AA. Well, you guys back then raised a lot of questions about the position of art and how it could function in a society to make it a better place in a certain way. Why did you kind of find this form of the business person, the media person? Can you take us a little bit back to those days and how that process went? Working with the three of you together, you were really like a unity in all meaning, and then kind of stepped into this chameleontic media business appearance.
Well, unfortunately, the punchline of that got edited out, which is where I say it isn't art unless it sells.
So in this, I've got a really loud echo right now, so I'm having a little bit of trouble talking, but in the 70s, I'm going to take my earphones off for a moment while I answer that question.
Sure.
In the 70s, it was a time when the idea of having a goal, for example, was very suspect. You weren't supposed to have goals. It was the leftovers of the hippie era had entered into the mainstream. And to be a businessman as an artist, of course, was the ultimate in kind of bad manners, let's say, within the art scene. And so we took on the persona. We took on the persona of a kind of badly acted businessman because it was exactly so wrong, so inappropriate, and consequently so noticeable at the time. So it was an ironic approach. And it's interesting, like to look at it now is very different than it was looking at it then. At the time, it raised a lot of anger within the art world, a lot of anger to present the art world in this way as being somehow about commercial success and money. And in fact, in the art world, there was no commercial success and there was no money. I mean, the art world hadn't really turned into the commercial thing that it became maybe in the mid-'80s, In the 70s, artists were not on the covers of magazines, and artworks were not selling for huge amounts of money, and artists were kind of way off in the margin of society. It's only in the mid-'80s that I think it's Robert Longo was the first artist on a magazine cover, and we all took note. That was 1986, and we all took note, and we said, "Aha, this is a sign of the future. Artists will become celebrities."
Nice. And yes, you can hear me again, AA.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. What is, and I did not mention that in the introduction, but I think it's worthwhile to underline, is of course that you guys were also very much in thinking about different distribution systems for art. You had your bookshops, you had your multiples, and it was all about making it more accessible in a certain way, and then at the same time presenting yourself as this successful businessman. And this kind of two sides of the same coin is I think up till today quite influential, and that's also a little advertisement we're going to make. There's a huge retrospective being made right now, I think, on General Idea that will start in Canada and will travel the world. And which years is that show being planned?
It opens in Canada on June next year.
Next year, already.
And I believe. Yes, and I think it's February of 23 at the Stedelijk Museum.
Nice, something really to look forward, at least for myself. And then if we talk about this position of art in a way that you want to make the world a better place, to put it that way. And that's also something we're going to step into when we talk a bit more about identity. How was General Idea having in mind kind of a deeper strategy, or did it all come back to the same efforts for opening up the doors in mass media, opening up the doors to reaching people outside this world of museums or galleries or whatsoever? Was there a bigger plan? Or is it just a parody on artists?
No, it was, I mean, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, it was a kind of parallel structure. So we didn't see that the art world as it existed had anything to offer us. And so we decided to make our own art world. So we published our own magazine, File Magazine. We opened Art Metropole in Toronto, which was a bookshop, but also an archive of art-related materials and video. It was Art Metropole also distributed artists' videos, and we published over 300 multiples in our time together, which was an effort to create a kind of parallel economy of low-cost artworks that art students or artists could afford. And that wouldn't be, so that we wouldn't be basically producing luxury objects. We didn't want to be in the business of producing luxury objects. We wanted.
How do you
we
feel
wanted.
about the fact that they are now highly collectible? And you know,
Yes.
to Art Basel, I was their last edition. I've seen many general idea works for sale.
Yes, it's confusing.
So, yeah.
It's confusing.
Is that also one of the maybe how do you say that, like a deeper motivation to reappear 10 years later, or maybe it's a little bit less, as AA Bronson?
Yes. Well, when I began to appear again, I mean, at first I couldn't do anything. I was just frozen for the first. I'm going to take my earphones off again.
Yeah, sure.
For the first 5 years or so, I was really just frozen. And then I began to think about what I wanted to do. And I decided that what I wanted to do was to reappear in the art world in a way that didn't really involve anything about the normal art economy. I mean, by then we're talking about the late 90s. So it's a time where the art market, I was living in New York, the art market was in high gear by then, high gear. The streets were swarming with people going to openings, and the latest prices at Sotheby's and Christie's were the headlines in the newspapers. And so I decided to only do work that was not for sale. And so I returned, I guess, to what we would call something like performance, as a way of, reactivating my presence in the art world as an artist, but without having to participate in that mainstream art economy, which I'm still not comfortable with it. I hope my dealers are not listening.
Okay, I think we have to step into chapter 2, AA on society. However, I think, and that is again the beauty of your oeuvre, but also General Ideas oeuvre, that this different aspects of society, sexuality, identity, and art are completely intermingled the whole time. And as we promised, we will start with a clip again. This time, test tube. We're going to look at a little bit more than 1 minute out of this fantastic work out of 1979. And first, we're going to watch that, and then we go back to the conversation.
And this is the line of effectiveness, and this is the line of social responsibility, and the distance between them is trendiness, and they all meet here in the mount of artistic endeavor.
You mean it's in my destiny to become a famous cocktail artist? It's written on my palm.
Please, it's not destiny that makes fame these days, AA. It's the media. TV, for instance, can impose anything it wants on the public.
Well, that's a rather fascist view of television, isn't it, Felix? I mean,
Well, that's what everyone says. Television is the great dictator. No matter how many channels there are, there's still no choice. Sitcoms, born-again TV, game shows, the news, they're all geared towards the consumption of repressive role models. The only thing that sort of social control needs is a captive audience, and it's got 'em.
Come on, Felix. That conspiracy rant is so popular, it should be on television. There's public access programs, there's community television, there's ethnic television. Why, there's even artist television itself. We all know there's airtime for anyone who wants it.
I can't hear you.
There is
Very rare.
airtime for anyone who wants it. And here we are with you on our private
We are,
airtime
yes.
here. If we go back to what we discussed earlier on, the relationship between your art practice and how that, was of meaning for a broader sense in society. And maybe we start again with general idea and also introduce other strategies you had. For example, if we really go back to the early days of your oeuvre around AIDS. Can you tell us, because in the background we see a great painting of the AIDS logo. Maybe we can really start with the beginning, how it came. Can you take us back to the end of the, what is it, no, early 80s, I think, yeah?
Well, the first painting was in 87, I guess. Although the idea itself was in 86.
No, please, take us to that moment.
Okay. Well, the funny thing is, we began working with the concept of an image as a virus already around 1971. And that's a concept we picked up from William Burroughs. I think it's the ticket that exploded around 1962, where he writes about the idea of images as viruses that are injected into the mainstream and alter society. And that's how we thought about change. That change, I'm going to have to take this off again for a moment, that change can be affected by injecting something into the mainstream and then letting that as a virus take over in a way. So and the File magazine was like that. File magazine looked like Life magazine. You could put it on any newsstand and people would pick it up because it looked familiar, but the content inside was something completely different. And it was a kind of virus that could travel around the magazine distribution system in a way that most artist publications could not. So we come to 1986 and we had just moved to New York. So I was 40 years old then. And the AIDS pandemic was just going into high gear. A close friend of ours was in hospital. We lived on the same block as the main hospital for AIDS patients in the city. And so we were suddenly overwhelmed with AIDS. Just the disease was appearing everywhere that you can imagine, in every aspect of our life. But it was not being talked about by the government. It was not really being talked about by the healthcare system in the US. And there was a real attempt to kind of silence what was going on, because it was gay men and not, it was not like COVID, which hit the entire population. And it got very severe very quickly. We were invited to produce a work for the first fundraiser for the American Foundation for AIDS Research. And we had the idea a year before. We spent most of our time sitting around drinking coffee and coming up with ideas. And the more impossible they seemed, the more we liked them. And the more, to tell you the truth, if they were in bad taste, then we really liked them. And we came up with the idea of making the AIDS logo in the same form as Robert Indiana's Love logo. And the interesting thing about Indiana's Love is that he never copyrighted it. And in the US in the 60s, when he made it, you had to formally write a letter to the government and copyright your image in order to have a copyright. He never did that. And it was stolen, I'm sure, hundreds of times, but especially by the American postal system, who made a postage stamp of it without ever acknowledging him. His name is not on it, and they never paid him, for example. So the Love logo, the Love logo was something you could show a German teenager at that time, and they would recognize it. They wouldn't know Robert Indiana maybe, but it was a virus. It was an image that had traveled through the mainstream system, through all of Western society, and everybody was familiar with it. So altering it into an AIDS logo, our AIDS logo could kind of travel in the footsteps of the Love logo, as it were, through all the systems of the society and through the communication systems and so on and so forth. It was very recognizable. So when we thought of that idea, we thought, oh no, we can't, that's really bad taste. And especially in such cheery colors, we can't possibly do that. And so when we were invited to make a work for the American Foundation for AIDS Research, we knew that was the work we should make. And the first painting The first painting, as soon as we made it and we saw it on the wall, we realized that it really had to be used in a more viral form, like it should. We made a poster, we put on the streets in various cities. There was an animation in the Spectacolor board in Times Square. We put posters in the subway system, because the subway system, in a way, is the blood network of New York. And we were injecting that image into the bloodstream of New York, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea anyway, that it was an image that traveled really fast.
Yes, thank you for that, because I think this is really one of the examples where artists were so extremely influential in also creating awareness of how power systems operate, in what they tell you and what they don't tell you, that you really can make an agenda out of your art practice and have topics discussed which were so important to be discussed, but as AA already mentioned, due on the fact that they were mainly brought by gay men as the topic to be on the agenda, were ignored.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
It's interesting about the image, I think, that it doesn't say anything. It's just the word AIDS.
Yeah.
So it was very provocative. It was very confrontational, but there was no content. There was no position taken. So what happened was, whichever audience saw it tended to project their content into the image and assume it was about what it was for them. And consequently, it was able to travel around the world. You know, it wasn't dependent on language, and it wasn't dependent on the particular situation in a particular country. It brought up whatever the issue was that needed to be brought up wherever it went.
Yes, thank you for adding that. I try to stick to a certain time plan of this event. So we're going to jump from society to sexuality, but I think we kind of stumbled into that already. And first we do a small clip again. This time from this fantastic video, Shut the Fuck Up. And it's, again, a 1-minute clip, and I hope you really consider them as invitations to see them in total. Not sure if you like it, but I think they are on Ubu Web, where you can see them. Otherwise, there are many places where you can actually see them in an even better quality, for example, in the library of the Stedelijk Museum. First to the clip, and then we continue this conversation also on this practice of this, well, to inject this awareness in society about different forms of sexuality, which are always left out, especially for the people who were yesterday at this magnificent performance by Marijke de Rover. I really loved that. It's so beautiful to have this conversation also in the memory of that performance. But first the clip.
Hey, Felix, listen to this.
Well, it for sure was the not the most direct directly to you speaking fragments out of this Shut the Fuck Up video, which becomes very outspoken at certain moments in the film. But funny to see it again now, AA. We can tell you got bigger budgets for making films. Right?
No, actually not really. I think Test Tube, which was made with the Apple originally, had a bigger budget than Shut the Fuck Up, which was made for the festival, which was in where? Rotterdam, I think.
Yeah, I think it was the film festival.
We have a big Dutch history, but that segment was stolen from Italian television.
Ah, okay.
It was. Yeah, they already had the dancing poodles. We laid the images over the top, but the actual dance sequence is stolen from an Italian television spectacle.
Well, we already have an idea on Italian television shows. What about this poodle? Maybe because I'm quite, not surprised to see poodles, but maybe people who for the first time stumble into this fragment, they will say, okay, what's that with that poodle? Who is Miss Poodle?
Well, we always said that one day around 1981, we heard barking at the door, and actually Felix went and opened the door, and in came all these poodles. And from there on, they kind of took over our lives. But I suppose really what the poodle is without really coming out and saying it, it's a stand-in for us, and it's a stand-in for gay men. In a way that was very unacceptable to gay men at the time. Gay men were heavily involved with being butch, and the poodle was not taken too kindly. It was definitely in bad taste. So at the time, you could not say you were a gay artist or your career would be over. Sort of instantly, there'd be no more career. It would have been impossible. But we were determined to get the critics to talk about sexuality in our work. And we kept pushing the sexual content or the implications. And the poodles, and especially those graphics of fucking poodles, basically, were maybe the most extreme image going in that direction. But at first, the critics said, oh, these apparently fucking poodles are really just metaphor for working together, for collaboration. And then finally, there was a British writer in about 1986 who had just graduated from the queer theory stream at Exeter University. And he was the first one to write about us through the lens of queer theory. And suddenly it was okay to talk about being gay. Suddenly there was a language for it. And we always felt that we had provided the imagery that was the illustration for queer theory. That was our part in the development of queer theory.
Mm-hmm. All through the muse. I always considered the poodle as a sort of a muse for general ideas.
Yes. Yeah.
And what I liked about the poodle is, of course, that especially it's not only about this reference to gay men, but it's also this creature which, in the way it is cut, becomes partly culture, partly nature. It's really in between those two kind of spectrums. Is there a question?
Yeah.
In the meantime, I looked if there were already online questions. That gives me the moment for the online viewers to really encourage you to send questions, because take the opportunity that we have a full hour with AA. I find that a treat. It should be a treat for you as well. So make use of that and file and send us your questions you have. We go quickly back to the AIDS works by presenting a few slides. If that is possible out of the technique booth. Because it's I think also nice to talk about the color aspect. You said, well, it was so over the top as a logo that kind of carried itself throughout New York in those days. But if we continue also for the next slide, and then we see the Robert Indiana version, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So here you see the source next to the result. And I always find this next picture still very shocking. Maybe we can see that as well. This is what we were looking at in those days. This is how, I still think AA, you guys were extremely brave in also going out with these images, which are so private and so vulnerable, because this is one of the members in his sick bed. And then we go back to the next image, a beautiful piece where the construction of the word is already lost and built into this enormous cross painting. And then we run through, because I have to make a little advertisement for our museum as well, to the next slides. This is what you can see here, and I add that there is a fantastic story about why also Rietveld and Mondriaan became infected by the image virus. Maybe we still have time to discuss that, I'm not sure. But that's why the normally yellow parts of this world-famous iconic chair is replaced by the green. Next slide. And this is how you can see it at the moment in our galleries. And next slide. Where it is reunited with the icon it refers to very early Rietveld furniture and Van Doesburg painting in the back. Just to give you a broader sense, I'm a kind of doubting. We also had, and I leave that up to you, AA, because it's not a surprise. We had a question also by Melanie Benayo. Should we throw that in now or continue the conversation and keep that for the last part? What's your preference?
Well, it doesn't seem to relate to what we're talking about right now.
That would be quite a hard break. Okay,
maybe save it for the next part.
We save it for the next part. Although the question is very much oriented on sexuality, and I have to say we're going to end the chapter. Maybe we did not cover all aspects of that, but you know, what is an hour in a lifetime? And we can go to identity, and maybe also step a bit deeper into your practice as an artist, healer, as AA Bronson. Let's see. We do indeed still a small clip. Miss General ID is glamorous. That's where we're going to start this from pilot again as an introduction to the subject matter.
Miss General Idea is glamorous. She exists in a blissful perfection that is ignorant of dialectics. Her lifestyle is timeless, a closed system. Miss General Idea has no misgivings, no regrets, no political ambitions. Miss General Idea is above all an image, an object, a container wherein her followers sense a great innocence. Miss General Idea may not be beautiful. Her title grants her the framework within which glamour settles, like dust. Above all, she must be brilliant, clothed, separate, and willful.
Nice pick of music also. I didn't hear that for a long time, this kind of background noises. Well, that brings us to identity. We discussed the poodle already. Now, General Idea, the Miss General Idea appeared also in a new version. Can you tell us a little bit about that? The Miss General Idea.
A new version? In a new version? I'm not sure what you mean.
Now we saw this very, a very attractive female figure suddenly popping up as a symbol.
Yes, actually very early though. It's already by 1970.
Yeah.
I suppose that I'm not quite sure how that began. We came across an image of a dominatrix in black rubber in around 69 or 70 in a little sex magazine. and it was an image, as you know, about this high, and we blew it up into a meter high or something, and called her Miss General Idea, and referred to her as our muse. We were, in a way, her slaves. We were the slaves to artistic inspiration. So it was a kind of corny pastiche of what artists are supposed to be about.
And was it also, of course, playing with this obsession of mass media with the female figure?
Yes, and with inspiration is always represented as being female, of course. It was the artist is always male. I mean, it was the
cliche.
It was a kind of cliche.
Yeah.
It was a cliche. It was acting out the cliche.
Exactly. We did not underline that yet, but of course the cliche is quite a theme that comes up oftenly in the oeuvre of General Idea. And that's why I really was, what I just told you in the introduction, kind of shocked when I saw your show at Esther Schipper's. And we can maybe have some slides of images of the AA Bronson that reappeared on the artist stage. So here, well, shamanistic is quite obvious. But still the colors refer to it. But maybe you want to add something to this, AA?
Yeah, I mean, those two pieces, I should tell a little story around it. We were spending our summers on Fire Island at the Pines or Cherry Grove, which are two little resorts on Fire Island next to each other, just outside of New York. And that's where the gay population of New York tended to summer. And they were, Fire Island is a very long, skinny sandbar with little towns dotted along it. And then the area we see here in this slide, the blue slide, is the area between the two towns. And in one town, in Cherry Grove, it tended to have drag queens, guys in leather, gays of color, etc. And in the Pines, which was the next one over, it tended to be art dealers or people in the fashion industry or important people in the recording industry and so on. And they kept very much apart until the clock struck 12. And then after midnight, in the dark, they would come together in the wilderness between the two towns, which is right here. And so at the high point of the AIDS epidemic, many gay men came to Fire Island to spend their last days. And many men asked to have their ashes scattered into this very area that you see in this picture, which was called, what was it called? The meat rack. And so the ashes of many gay men are scattered in the sand in this area, which was basically a gay cruising site. And here we kind of are taking the form of the spirits of the dead. We're acknowledging the spirits of the dead who are with us always in this part of Fire Island.
Mm-hmm. And this, because you also did a few projects where you had this almost in-between format of rituals, healing, performative aspects. And then maybe it's good to see the next slides, where also I think the kind of the physical materials or the tent as a symbol of enclosure kind of came out. That nowadays is yeah, it's your kind of way of expressing this new identity. Can you tell us a bit about how this healing aspect, yeah, it's probably not suddenly, but how that became part of your identity, of your being an artist, and how do you relate that to each other, this healing aspect and being an artist?
Well, at the height of the pandemic, AIDS pandemic in New York, I began to take a series of courses in healing from California. And I mean, I really jumped into that realm of healing. I began taking course after course. And in California, you can get certificates to say you're an expert in rebirthing or whatever. And so I got 13 of those certificates. And by California law, I would be legally, you know, a legal healer. You could come to me and put it on your insurance, your health insurance. So after Jorge and Felix died, and they died at home, and I was the one who saw them through to their deaths, I had this idea that I was perhaps very good at being a kind of midwife to the dying, of guiding people to their deaths, and that maybe I should be doing that professionally. But frankly, I was too burned out, and I left it for a while. And when I, in 98, the same school offered, I'm going to take this off for a second, the same school offered a kind of refresher course for professional healers. And although I didn't consider myself a professional healer, but I went and I took that course, which was really incredible. And I realized at the end that I could have been teaching that course as easily as taking it, and that I should do something about that. So I went back to New York. I found 3 people who were willing to be my guinea pigs. I did healing sessions on them once a week for 6 months. And then I felt at home enough with the whole process that I let it be known that I was now a healer. And funnily enough, Butt magazine did an interview with me at exactly that moment about my healing practice. And suddenly I was overwhelmed with clients, and I was no longer AA Bronson of General Idea or AA Bronson artist. I was suddenly AA Bronson healer. And it was so successful, in a sense, so overwhelming, that I thought I should roll that into my art activity as well, and that within the art world, I should become AA Bronson healer. And initially, I applied that to that extension of the AIDS pandemic and the era we were living on, and so on. But then I also began to extend it into, for example, ideas about places, the healing the different cities needed because of their particular histories, or the marginalized populations of particular cities that needed to be acknowledged and needed healing, and so on and so forth. So I began to develop the idea of healing in many different ways.
Mm-hmm. And also what you do with your headphones, I have to do with my glasses the whole time. That's an interesting conversation we have. But what is, I think, very, very kind of interesting and also so beautiful, how this strategy of placing different value systems into the art world with a kind of an aim to also come beyond the art world is now taken up again by you as, if I may say, a softer person. You know, the general idea could be very cynical, could be quite straight through the heart with shut the fuck up and things like that. And then you reappear as a very approachable and very soft healing artist that still brings, I think, a lot of different angles of looking at reality and also representing different forms of cultural backgrounds, sexual backgrounds at the main stage. So I was wondering, and I got a cue, we only have time's up. Oh, we're gonna, well, we leave that for us, right? When the time is up.
Okay.
I was wondering, is that also with this bigger plan that we discussed earlier about the general idea tactics, that you had this aim of making the world a better place? Is that still also at the heart of your practice as the artist healer you are right now?
Well, yes, very much so. But I wonder if I'm still an artist healer. I'm not totally sure. I think I'm going through another change, and I think it has to do with aging, because I'm 75 now, And I can't approach the subject of healing in the same way anymore. I don't have the energy, and so I think I'm in a period right now of reevaluating everything I'm doing and trying to find a way forward.
And yes, we have a question from the audience. So I have to take off my glasses to be able to read that. And we step into the question part, because I'd like this very much as an end, that you say, well, you know, that maybe you're also kind of a next crucial moment where you are repositioning yourself in this world of the art, but also of yourself as an artist, etc. And that's what I think I can see all over the place continuously, is how many younger artists are seeing some sort of a role model in you, in your current practice or recent practice as AA Bronson, how the way you kind of address queerness, the way you make us aware of a more queer world is so much inspiring. But here's a question. Unfortunately, there's not a name connected to the person who asks this question. Almost all your works are collaborations. What does collaboration mean for you? How do you see yourself in these collaborations, and what is the value for you? Anyhow, where does AA Bronson coincide with another person?
Yeah, there's two periods. So there's the period of collaborating within General Idea, and then this collaboration as I do it now, which is very different. So I think the question is probably about collaboration now.
I think so too.
Yeah. So I collaborate almost entirely with younger artists, mainly because most of the artists of my generation are dead. So there's not a lot of choice. But also, I always think back to the great curator Jean-Christophe Amann, who I first met at the Kunsthalle in Basel in the 70s, and we did a survey of General Idea with him in 1984, and he said, when I'm working with an artist, I try to look over their shoulder, try to see what it is that they're seeing, try to kind of meld with them in a way, and then with my expertise as a curator, find the way to amplify their vision in the context of my museum, you know. So I come at collaboration a little bit like that. I try to think of the artist I'm working with and try to see over their shoulder at how they see the world and how they work, and then try to see my role as amplifying that somehow, to kind of step into their shoes and then together to do something that amplifies that viewpoint. So collaboration to me is about, I guess it's a little bit like sex, right? It's like really melding two people in a very deep way. It's not about making a deal as to who gets to do what or anything like that, you know. It's something quite different.
Well, you just gave the perfect next question, which we have as a video, the perfect introduction for the next question, as we have on video by Melanie Benayo, also present at the festival here. Maybe we can start playing that, and then we can kind of summarize and round it up, because I think we really have to stop at 1, right? Yeah. So we do the question, AA, and otherwise we shut off the things online, but we can continue here with the lucky ones who are here in the room. Or do we also have to leave the room? Yeah, okay, we can. So, but let's do the question, because I like it that Melanie took the time to make this.
Hey, AA. Hey. How are you doing? So we've been asked by the IMPAKT Festival to give you a question. So yesterday we gave a workshop at a festival here in Berlin called the Stretch Festival. This is a festival for sexuality and intimacy for gay, bi, trans and queer men. Yes. and we're keeping it a bit mysterious in the dark here. What that workshop was about. And that workshop was about pussy gazing for gays. And we brought in like 6 pussy persons who were not all naming their genitals pussy, but were assigned female at birth, to create a safe container for like gay men to be in the presence of another type of genitals and bodies than their own. And this workshop came out of our own experience with my partner, Pa Dudush, to get out of the box of homo normalization and transcend anxiety for other types of bodies and identities and sexes. And this is also something that we experienced very alive in our community, so that's why we created a safer space for people without being doped up, experience proximities to bodies that they're usually not in intimate relationships with. And we wanted to create a container that was for fun and curious and educational, and our question is, would you join our workshop? And what do you think about it? Ciao!
When I saw the question, I felt we need to send it already to AA, whether he was willing to kind of answer this, just out of, how do you say that, beleefdheid. Of course, it's more an invitation than a question. That's what we kind of said about this question. There is, however, of course, this aspect of what they call homo normalization, is that, and maybe I should even put it differently. What I see when I look at this clip of Melanie is, on the one hand, a great, almost a fan asking a question to a hero, like really full, like, okay, this is the moment I'm gonna question someone who was so important in making space for these kinds of performance-based or therapy-based or whatsoever gatherings. And on the other hand, trying to be provocative towards AA. That's how I kind of read this question, but I wonder how you read it.
Well, pretty much like that.
It's very unprofessional. Yeah.
Nice sound, though.
Yeah, then it's always exciting who calls.
Well, General Idea's position on, let's call it gayness. We perceived the gay world already in the 70s of having 2 streams. One was the stream of gay liberation, looking for acceptance in the mainstream world more. And the other one was, I don't know if it has a name. We aligned ourselves with the second, which we would say, for example, Guy Hockenheim, the French writer, represents an idea about being alternative and being outsiders, and being not part of the mainstream as having its own value. And so General Idea was always aligned in that way. And as far as actual sexuality went, we were in the early days a kind of commune. There were about 8 of us, and this included a transgender person who had not had the operation, a male to female. And it was interesting because in those days you had to make that decision. Do you want to have it chopped off or not? It was not. Nobody thought of the idea that you could just leave it. This was such a peculiar time. And poor Pascal was so distraught because he had a beautiful, really big penis, and he did not want to cut it off. And but also was a magnificent female figure and a wonderful opera singer. So that those tensions come very early in the time of General Idea. Then if you go much later, General Idea tended to be bad-mouthed in the gay press in the 80s, again, because we were not gay liberationists. and we didn't align ourselves in what they felt was a politically correct way. And then when you move into the period after Jorge and Felix's deaths and into my life as a healer, of course, as a healer, you take everybody as you find them. And in the workshops that I took for a number of years, I came across many, many different kinds of people who thought of themselves in many different kinds of ways. And consequently, as a healer myself, I always said I specialized in men, but I had left that totally up to the client to decide what that meant. And so I did have pussies on my massage table, to put it bluntly.
Yeah. So we leave the question open for Melanie. You share the same city, Berlin, and who knows what
Yes.
what kind of encounter will follow. I have to kind of close this event here
right. We're over.
at the IMPAKT Festival, and that leaves me to thank you very, very much, AA, that you took the time to be with us in this way. I'm completely fed again and very much inspired, even though it was on a long distance connection. And I can only imagine how it would have been when you would have been sitting here, because your way of sending out the energy you are carrying with you is so strong that it is also feelable here on the moment you are only online presence. I wish in all my Zoom meetings there was someone like you in every meeting, then my day would look so much better than in these pandemic circumstances. Thank you for the audience. There are a few people here. I cannot kind of change the camera, I think, to see them, but we can try to make ourselves hear as loud as possible for AA for sharing this time with us.
Thank you so much.
And now you left your earphones on, huh? That's good. Thank you, AA, and hope we run into each other someday soon.
I hope so too. Thank you.
Dat was het, jongens.